Bruchim habaim, salam alaikum. Thank you all for coming this afternoon on this gorgeous day. My name is Deborah Cantor, and I'm the rabbi of Congregation B'nai Tikva Shalom here in Bloomfield. We are so honored to host this gathering announcing the release of the Nonprofit Security Grants Program for 2020. Particular thanks go to the governor and to Michael Bloom of JFACT, the Jewish Federation Association of Connecticut, whose dedication to community safety has made this possible. Now, I want to tell you something about religious institutions and nonprofits. We are here to serve people. We value warmth, openness, and creating a welcoming atmosphere. That's at the core of who we are. If you look at this building, you'll see that it was built and designed by optimists who felt comfortable in their new country. These were largely Holocaust survivors, and they were proud to celebrate their Judaism in this great nation and state, and to be inviting to the surrounding community. And unlike some religious buildings that have impressive front staircases leading to big, thick wooden doors, our building is built with a giant Star of David as part of the edifice, is all ground level and largely glass, with an entirely open glass entryway. Our rear wall, not visible, has huge windows affording a view from the main sanctuary to the adjoining woods. It is beautiful and very, very inviting, but it is not secure. So here's the thing. All of us, whether houses of worship or nonprofits, we are keenly aware of our vulnerability during these times when anti-Muslim, racist, and anti-Semitic rhetoric and hate crimes are ever increasing. So even as we seek to keep our doors open in a symbolic sense, we are so grateful for the state grants which will enable us to be physically more secure. And now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Commissioner James Ravella, Commissioner of the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for coming today. This is an important day. Prevention is the best ingredient to prevent any kind of violent crime or insecurity that our nonprofits and our churches have. These should be safe havens for our places of worship, for both our churches and nonprofits. So I'm going to give you some of the nuts and bolts of the grant, and we have to thank the legislators and the governor for making that $5 million available. And I'll give you a little extra at the end. But this grant program was administered by the Emergency Management and Homeland Security, which is a portion of DES. It was made available in February for the grant applications. There was webinars from my folks to explain the process. And we started in March to begin to analyze all the information that came in at closing date. To date, there's about 97 folks that qualify. We're up around $4 million moving through that, and we expect that to hit our $5 million. Some of the things that nonprofits and houses of worship have put in for, surveillance cameras, solid core doors, ballistic glass, very similar to our schools. We have had this program for numerous years now. This money has to be used by June 30th of 2023. And there's an added bang to our buck here. Emergency Management also pursues federal grants. And in this case, we were eligible for $1.6 million from the federal nonprofit and security grant program. The United States government actually gave us $2,093,000 on top of the $5 million. So we're going to have available $7,093,000 to hand out and to administer to these houses of worship and nonprofits. Of course, you can't get both. It's one or the other, and you can't double dip. And those are just some of the rules. But really, it's important for us to pay a lot of attention to protection and making folks feel secure. legislature and the governor and the federal government done today. So I'll be available later on. Have any technical questions, but I'll turn it back to the moderator.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I'd like to introduce now Michael Bloom, who's Executive Director of JFACT, the Jewish Federation Association of Connecticut.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Michael Bloom. I am the Executive Director of the Jewish Federation Association of Connecticut. We are an advocacy organization which lobbies city, state, and federal officials on issues of importance to the 7 Jewish federations and their beneficiary agencies. I'd like to say David Warren, President and CEO of the Hartford Jewish Federation, is here. Thank you for your federation support. Thank you to the governor and the legislature for providing the funding necessary to help keep people safe. But it is a sad day when it is needed. Houses of worship should focus on their congregations, not purchasing bulletproof glass. That being said, I for one am thankful that we live in Connecticut. Only a handful of states have created a similar nonprofit state security grant program. I am grateful that we have a governor and a legislature that continue to state loud and clear, time and time again, that the state has a role to play in public safety. In addition to the nonprofit security grant program, the state of Connecticut has been proactive when it comes to combating hate crimes. The governor recently created and appointed 25 members to the Hate Crimes Advisory Council. I'm extremely proud to be one of those appointees, a place where leaders from different races and religions, as well as policymakers and law enforcement, will be charged with encouraging and coordinating programs that increase community awareness and reporting of hate crimes. In addition, this legislative session, legislators stepped up to the plate and enacted new laws which increase penalties for online harassment and bullying, as well as creating a civil rights division underneath the Office of Attorney General. Lastly, passing legislation is important, but education has an enormous role in trying to prevent future hate crimes. The state of Connecticut continues to reshape its public school curriculum. Over the last few years, legislation has passed which allows schools to teach about the Holocaust and other genocides, as well as African American, Latinx, AAPI, and Native American studies. These subjects are tough for teachers to teach and tough for students to learn, but it is very important. There is such a lack of knowledge around these subjects and histories, and we know that the more students are taught about the dangers of hate and where hate can lead, the stronger and safer our future generations will be. Every piece of legislation I mentioned was a priority for my organization, and I'm thankful to the governor and the Connecticut General Assembly for passing them, because all these measures taken together can help combat crime. Now I'll introduce our primary, our first and our biggest champion in the legislature on the nonprofit program, State Senator Derek Slapp.
Thank you. If you drive down Albany Avenue in West Hartford on any Saturday, you'll notice something. You notice the armed guards standing outside of the synagogues. It's heartbreaking that that's needed. Heartbreaking that people are afraid to worship. It's heartbreaking that people are afraid to go to a mosque or to church or to their synagogue. This program will make people feel safer, and it will make people safer. I believe it's not a stretch to say that this is going to save lives. Mike Bloom talked about the origins of this, and it started a few years ago, and it was, as far as I know, it was Mike Bloom's idea. He came to me, it was right after a mosque was attacked in Connecticut, and the first conversation I had was with Senator Anwar, who's going to follow me and speak in just a moment, and he said, absolutely, we need to do something. We talked to the Lamont administration, and they were immediately on board. Then we reached out to leadership and Senator Fasano and Minority Leader Claridis in the House, and within hours, we had a bipartisan news conference pledging support for this program. So I'm so pleased that it has been bipartisan, and this governor has really shown incredible leadership. And Mike also mentioned that this is not the only thing that we can do to combat hate, and that in the past session, previous two sessions as well, we've passed very important legislation in terms of education. Because I believe, and I know all of us standing behind me believe, that the more that we can teach love and tolerance and combat hate, the more we have of that, the less we need of this. Sadly, the day is not yet here, though, then when we don't need this program. In the budget that we just passed, the bipartisan budget, we included $15 million over 2 years in additional funds to make our houses of worship safer. And I look forward to working with the governor's administration to get that money out to the houses of worship as fast as possible. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Derek. I'd like to introduce now Bobby Gibson, who is our representative from this very area. Mr. Gibson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today is actually an exciting day to be here. Unfortunately, we have to be here, but it's bittersweet. Let me explain. It's exciting because it was mentioned about man's inhumanity against man. We had to pass a Holocaust bill about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, so that we can educate our kids on the atrocities of the Holocaust. We had to pass 2 years ago an African American, a Black history and Latino bill, because we had to educate our students on the contributions of Black people and Latino people to this country. Those are great things, but it's bittersweet. So proud and happy to have a governor who saw the vision and the need for the passage of those legislations, and also this legislation that will help protect our places of worship. It's a shame that we have to have this, but it's good. It's bittersweet. Hopefully this is a step in the right direction where we can continue to educate and help those who want to do harm or want to not acknowledge what has happened in this country. So again, Mr. Governor, thank you so much for passing this legislation. I'm proud to be up here with my fellow legislators from the Capitol. And I have to say this in closing. I'm up here also to represent Pastor Dalen Greer of Bethel Church in Bloomfield. About a year and a half ago, his church was vandalized. Hateful graffiti was spray painted on that house of worship right here in my district. And so it's a pleasure, Mr. Governor, that you pass legislation so that he can get a grant, so Bethel Church can get a grant to help protect those who want to do good and who want to worship and who want to spread love, because that's what we're here for. So again, thank you for having me here today. And Mr. Governor, I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby. You wore both those hats very well. I want to introduce now my dear friend, Senator Saud Anwar.
See, no individual, no community should ever have to think twice or be worried about their own safety and security of themselves or their loved ones when they go and pray and connect with the beloved. And then here we are in our state that we are doing the right thing to make sure that we will do what we can to make sure that no community, no individuals would have the fear as they connect with the beloved. And the reality, unfortunately, is in the last many years, hate has become a common conversation. People who actually had hate inside of them, they feel comfortable speaking about it online and in person and in action. In the last few years, we have had in our state, in the state of Connecticut, a mosque shot at, a mosque burnt, and then threatening messages to blow up places of worship. Anti-Semitism has increased in a manner that you actually are looking at the dates of the newspaper articles and the conversation and say, in 2020, in 2019, and now even in 2021, we are seeing this pattern, which as a society and as a world, we had said no more. But unfortunately, no more is not here yet. Until no more is not here yet, we are all united. One voice to stand together and say that if you attack one, you attack all. And we are going to stay united and make sure we protect each other. The protection is going to have multiple avenues. Education that you learned about, but also making sure that we as a society, we as community, we as faith leaders, we as elected leaders are going to stand up for each and every one of us. I'm so proud to be with my friends, with my colleagues from the legislature, with my faith group colleagues as well, and with our governor, who is so clear. When Senator Slapp and I were having this conversation with the governor's office, you know, it was like he was waiting, he was ready, and then there was no argument whatsoever. This was a very clear thing. His clarity on making sure that every citizen in our state is protected is inspirational. And that's what leadership looks like. So I can't thank our governor, and I cannot thank our legislators for their clarity in this effort, and it's bipartisan, because I did not hear any of my colleagues from across the aisle say anything negative either at any point. They were on board because this is something that there should be no two opinions about. I'm honored to be here, and let's celebrate and make sure we come together and celebrate when we don't need this. Thank you.
Thank you, Saud. It's my honor to introduce Reverend Goodwin. Is it Goodwin? Yes. Reverend Goodwin, who represents many, some 600 or so UCC congregations in southern New England. Reverend?
Good afternoon. My name is Reverend Darrell Goodwin. I represent over 600 congregations, 1,200 ministers, and about 120,000 of God's faithful. I'm new to Connecticut, newly in this position as the first Black, openly gay person to hold this role. And I wish that upon announcing this historic moment after hundreds of years of our churches, I would have been welcomed to this state with, "Welcome, Darrell, we're so excited." But instead, I was welcomed with threats and concerns, not only for my bodily safety, but the safety of maybe many of the churches I was so excited to come here to serve. My first letter to my board of directors was about how we would figure out safety precautions at my multiple conference offices so that as their new leader, I might have the privilege and honor to serve the people. Last week, we were in conversation with security services for new cameras in our parking lot and new doorbells that also have cameras and new systems on our windows and doors as we consider reopening, because I have to be concerned about if I'm opening someone who's coming for maybe pastoral care or someone who's coming because they disagree with the fact that I might exist as a faith leader. Many of our churches have been beneficiaries of this grant, from Wilton to Guilford, and many others I hope will take advantage of this type of legislation from our governor and our leaders. It's important for us to name that religious freedom is not an invitation to hate. Freedom of speech is not an invitation to hate. And the sense that I get to celebrate who I am and my identity is not an invitation to threaten the safety of others. So I stand here as a community leader who just wants to serve. And my invitation is a thanksgiving for moments like today, but it is also an invitation that we figure out how do we coexist as human beings for one another. That for the next Black, openly gay religious leader who comes to serve in the state of Connecticut, that they don't have to worry not now just about the color of their skin or their sexual orientation, but they may also have to be afraid of their professed faith life. We can do better. We are doing better. And I think each and every one of us has an invitation to change the very world around us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend. And I think coexistence is kind of the bottom of what we are striving for. Coexistence means we put up with each other in a, nonviolent way. We look at the others, capital O others, and we say, all right, you can be here with us. All right. That's not what any of us is striving for ultimately. Coexistence is the first bottom level. But what all of us are committed to is being in relationship with one another, is cultivating love and connection. And when we feel safe, we're more able to do that. But there's no amount of safety precautions that we can take that will change our world, not alone. Making our buildings safer, helping with security upgrades, that allows us to then do the real work of cultivating love, of being in relationship, of moving way beyond just tolerating one another. And now it's my honor to introduce Reverend Greer.
Good afternoon. My name is Reverend Dalen Greer, and I'm the pastor of Bethel AME Church in Bloomfield, Connecticut, right around the corner and down the street. About a year ago, our church was terribly received graffiti on our church walls. Our beautiful edifice was defaced in the midst of the COVID pandemic. And the persons that wrote on the walls of our church referred the church to a bunch of dogs. And it was very disheartening because our faith community really took to heart that as we could come to church, that we would not be able to worship freely and we would be considered a bunch of animals. I'm glad that our community of faith came together with the Bethel Church family and said that that was a disgrace and that we would not stand for it. This grant will help our church community make sure that our church members or anyone that enters the doors of our church would feel safe, that we would be able to have the necessary equipment and cameras placed, that we can upgrade what we currently have, that persons would remain safe. Just last week, the same church, the same property, persons are going from church to church, stealing catalytic converters off of your church vans and properties. And ours was one that happened again. And so we're glad that we can use these funds to put in place the necessary security so that people who come to church can worship freely, regardless of whatever our institution of faith is, that we ought to be able to worship God freely. So we want to thank our legislators, our governor, for being behind this and pushing it, that we can worship God in the midst of times that are really scary to a lot of people, that we can come together and worship freely. And so we want to say thank you on behalf of our community of faith, all of these churches and mosques and synagogues that are gathered here. We want to say thank you, but especially thank you to our governor and legislators for helping us feel safe in our community.
Thank you so much, Reverend Greer. And now I'd like to introduce our governor, Governor Lamont. Governor, I know you have a few other things to do every minute of the day, and we so appreciate that you're here. And we know, we've heard from everybody about your deep commitment to keeping us safe and to moving forward on these security issues. So it's such an honor to welcome you here and to welcome you to the podium, and just personally and professionally to thank you for all that you've done to help us and all that you will continue to do. Thank you so much, Governor Lamont.
Well, thank you, Rabbi Cantor, and everybody. I wouldn't be anywhere else but here today. And just listening to Rabbi Cantor, it feels so peaceful, feels so safe. And she says, here we are at this wonderful synagogue, and I worry that we have too many doors. Isn't that what you just told me? That we have too many doors. You say, a house of worship is all about doors being open, welcoming people in. And the worry that you hear for the church, the synagogue, the mosque, that they have to be scared. And look, this last couple of years, and this COVID has, unleashed some demons. It was back during the, peak of COVID. It was weird stuff was happening. We had many, many fewer people driving than ever before, but more car fatalities just because of people driving like a bat out of hell on the extremes and the nervousness and the stress that was going on. And then we started seeing another invisible virus. That was, racism and anti-Semitism. We saw that, as you just heard from the speakers, reflected in bomb scares at mosques and swastikas on synagogues and, cheap threats at our churches, threatening people's bodily harm. And as Saud said, threat to one of us is a threat to all of us. And that's why we're standing here, together as one. And little did I know that we'd be talking about security cameras and reinforced steel doors, and Derek talking about the security guards in front of the synagogues, and sort of the opposite of what we're all about. But our job and Commissioner Ravella's job is to make sure people are safe and to make sure people feel safe. And that's what this grant was all about. And that's why we're going to do everything we can. Look, we were oversubscribed. I mean, we put out, some money and said, let us do what we can to make sure that your houses of worship, your community centers, school, whatever, have the security they need so that students and worship know that they can go in safety. And we were oversubscribed. Just the sense of distress that I saw out there. So that's what we're doing. There's a lot of different types of crime out there. We've talked a little bit about some of the juvenile crime and how we head that off with better social work and support services. We talked about that. The extremism out there, some of the nationalist extremists, and what you've seen January 6th, what you've seen, they stopped some folks just up there in the Mass Pike just a few weeks ago, folks feeling like they're empowered somehow. And then you have this type of crime and threats of crime. And you deal with the public safety head on, you get there ahead of it, and you do everything you can to make sure the people of Connecticut and those who want to worship in peace know they can worship in peace. And that's why I'm so proud, working with our friends in the legislature, Derek and Saud helping to take the lead on this, that we're able to get these grants out to people and make us secure. Thanks, everybody.
Again, let me express our deepest thanks to the governor, to the legislators and political leaders here, to the other faith leaders here, and thank you to all of you for realizing what an essential matter this is to bring out to the public through the media. Thank you all for coming this afternoon. I know that a few people will be staying here, right around here, if you have questions. But again, thank you to everybody who came here today, to the governor and to everybody else. And thank you also to members of the media for coming and covering this important story. Thank you again. and my sister-in-law, my beloved sister-in-law, Sherry Cantor, the mayor of West Hartford, is here. Also a member of my synagogue. Well, I bet she had a real choice about that. What? You're not joining my synagogue?
A list is maintained by Emergency Management and Homeland Security of not only the 97 recipients that we expect to be up to 120 or so, or the 400 applicants, yes.
I'm just getting to the point. Are you going to be releasing that publicly so we can see who got what and how much?
We will not.
Why not?
There's a security aspect to it that we'll argue as we do with the school security grant program also.
Well, how are people to know if it was distributed fairly?
You know, we have state auditors that come in and can review the program if you'd like, but it's not going to be subject to release. Can you imagine bad guys looking at that if it's publicly made available?
Can you give us a breakdown then? In other words, out of the 97, what I mean by that is 60 churches, 30 synagogues. Give us some parameters here.
Chris, I could do that for you in the future once the grants are administered. Just reach out to Brian Foley and we can do that for you in generalities.
And what would you said there'd be 120 in the future? Is that your goal?
No, Chris. Right now, there's 97 that are in the hopper being administered funds. We'll siphon the $2,093,000 from the federal, and we'll keep moving down the list. We expect to hit about 120 or so of our applicants.
Had a question for the governor
On topic?
about COVID.
Anything else on this? Can I get back to you in 3 minutes? Just let's do that. Thank you, Governor. Well done. We'll reset. This house, not that house. This house, not that house.
Oh.
Right.
This was a the amount of money given.
Oh, thank you. I love that part. That's my favorite part.
My wife and daughter.
Hey, vote. Just hiding behind my glasses.
Allison and Marley.
Oh, is that right? Where is he? He is everywhere. It's the first of Blumenthal, you said? Oh, in Bloomfield. Oh, I got it. I thought you said Blumenthal. I was saying, where's Blumenthal? It's the first event I've ever been to when he wasn't here. Yeah. How's your state rep doing so far? Oh.
You didn't hesitate for even a second there.
Everybody loves Bobby.
I've heard most people.
No, everybody loves Bobby.
Should I do some here?
Photo, if you need photo with these folks,
Yes.
we have some.
Allison Bloom and my daughter Marley.
And that was the problem. Our cameras were only at the door of the church. And Keep seeing each other when we're talking about hate crimes and bigotry, and we should collaborate on some good initiatives. Well, we've been talking with Mayor Brian Cantor and creating some kind of local effort focused on
Hey guys, we're going to the governor just finish our budget plan. Okay. So I'll just clear over the way. Thank you.
I was looking at it. Right. I don't want to be doing that. It's a shame.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Click those heels together when you go to
I had to hustle, but I did it on
I told you this was a lie.
That's right.
You did an amazing job. I took some pictures. I'll be sure to send them. Yeah, I do. Yeah, good to see you as always. Yes, come on. Oh, okay.
Yeah, 1 sec. Good to see you. Brian Gold. Good to see you.
You got it? Okay.
I said I want
We're doing okay. I have a lot of forehead. A couple curveballs still we gotta get through. What are you doing now? Oh, good.
It's a shame that we're in college.
Come back next summer. We can use it.
All right, take care. Let's go back to the podium. Yeah, we were
Let me just take a couple questions here. You guys don't mind?
Yeah. I'll get you some.
I'll let you guys go.
All right.
Sorry about that. You had a question?
Yeah, so New York State just announced that their employees, state employees, either have to get vaccinated or
These guys just wait 1 sec.
Okay, New York State employees vaccinated.
yeah, and apparently President Biden is expected to announce something similar for federal employees. Is that something that Connecticut will be announcing or
Not something we're announcing. Something I got to think about and look at. Getting more people vaccinated. There's nothing more important than that. I got to tell you though, it's really time for the FDA to step up and make up their mind on these vaccines. I mean, we've gone from Operation Warp Speed to Operation Slow Roll, and they still can't decide whether to give the full authorization for these vaccines. We've had hundreds of millions of these vaccines safely and effectively administered all over this country, and more than that, all over the world. That would make our lives a lot easier before anybody starts talking about mandates. But if they can't make up their minds, we'll have to.
what about the CDC masking guidance that was announced yesterday? Is that something that you support?
The masking guidance, as I understand it, said vaccinated, unvaccinated, indoors in those areas that are more contagious, and certainly suggested the same for our schools. And that's something we've got to look at. There's no question about it that masking is incredibly effective when it comes to our kids and when it comes to those who are unvaccinated. But I don't want to take our eye off the ball. We're doing everything we can to get more people vaccinated. That answers all these questions.
When do you expect to announce the timeline of vaccination, especially for kids in school?
I think within the next 2 weeks, just to give teachers and parents time to prepare.
You go back to what you were just saying about the FDA making up their mind. Are you waiting until they make a final ruling on the vaccines before you make that call for states?
I was going to wait, but you can't wait forever. I mean, it's time for them to make a call. I think they're discouraging some people from getting vaccinated. I think that creates a lot more risk and danger in our communities. I think it's time for them to step up and make the call.
Have you been told that you have the authority, either under state law or under your emergency powers, to direct state employees to either get vaccinated, to show proof of vaccination,
Yeah, Paul, I think you answered the question right. Get vaccinated, and if you don't, you have to, mask and test. I think that's what you see in New York and California, and I think that makes the most sense. Do I have the power to simply do that? I think I have to sit down with the state employees and talk to them. And as you know, the emergency powers go till September 30, so I better be talking to the legislature as well. We have, I don't know how exact the numbers are, but I do know that a majority are vaccinated, but there's real variability depending on what department you may be in. So it is an issue. I mean, somebody asked me the other day about how about nurses in nursing homes? Don't you think maybe they have to get vaccinated as well? My answer to that is I think so. I think people would be a lot safer. These are private enterprises, so when we mandate that, if we mandate that, is another question. A lot easier if the FDA said go.
Getting back to the masking guidelines, yesterday before the announcement of the new updated CDC recommendations, you said that you had been largely following CDC guidance on these matters and that you were inclined to follow their masking guidelines. Is that still the case with you? Has anything changed?
Yeah, I'm inclined to do that, Paul. But remember, they did say, masking indoors and outdoors, indoors, vaccinated and unvaccinated, subject to local conditions. So that's the variable that I'm talking to. I'm talking to my fellow governors about that. Look, there's incredible variability. Some districts have 99% vaccinated, some have half that. So, but we're a small state, so that's why give us a couple weeks to figure that out.
Because of that variability, would you ever consider instituting restrictions in one county but not another, or something like that?
I think so, but look what's happened in the last 2 weeks. And look at how this variant is accelerating. And look at how our infection rate went up to almost 3% in today's numbers. So, early on you would have said, boy, Canaan is at 99% and some other towns at 49%. Perhaps they should be treated differently, give them a little more discretion. And I think that still would be my inclination unless I see this infection rate keep popping up.
Have you spoken to your friend Scott Gottlieb, and did you see where he said today, I believe, that these new guidelines would have a negligible impact? He didn't seem very impressed.
Yeah, Scott's been pretty thoughtful on the variant in this sense. He says he looks at what's going on in Britain, where he sees the 7-day infection average going down, not up. The implication being that the infection with the Delta variant is ripping through those communities. Let's say they're a month ahead of us. So his advice to me was wait a little bit longer. There's so much we don't know and so much changes every couple of weeks.
Back in the fall, you had criteria for different levels of alert that relied strictly on cases per day for 100,000 people on a rolling average. You brought up the vaccine. I mean, what criteria do you think you'd be looking at now versus back then to decide hotspots? Is it more complicated now that we have the vaccine and we have a
It's more complicated. I mean, I think you still continue to look at the infection rate and see where there's real community spread within that community. If there's big community spread, that gets into the classrooms a lot faster. And vaccination rate, like I said. But, my number one priority is to get our kids back into school, get our kids back into school safely. So you look at infection rates, you worry about, oh my gosh, here we go again. One person got in contact. We have quarantines, kids stay home, parents can't go to work. So for me, number one would be getting our kids to school safely.
Is it more difficult now to sort of impose the kind of restrictions that we have seen in the past? So now you have about, we're almost 60% fully vaccinated, I think, of the eligible population, or 70%. You got other people who are just, well, you don't need to be told about how other people feel.
It's tougher now. It's tougher. Just 2 weeks ago, the Capitol was being circled by protesters saying the emergency is over, get off my back. And that didn't happen 9 months ago. 9 months ago, when we were talking about some of the rules, Connecticut had been hit hard, along with New York and New Jersey, and people were ready to do everything they could to keep themselves and their families safe. So there's a little bit of a balance you got to get there, but I want to do everything to make sure our kids can get into that school safely.
Have you met with any of the leaders
I'll certainly be talking to the leadership in the next week or two as we crystallize what we think we ought to do. You know, it makes you wonder. I mean, I can drop the hammer, say this is what we ought to do for every school, and then in 3 weeks the emergency powers are over, we go back. So it's better to do that in concert with the legislature. You're absolutely right.
Will you request an extension?
I don't know where we're going to be on September 30. But I am going to sit down with the legislative leadership and the public health committees and let them know this is the best information we have in terms of infection. This is what we see in terms of Delta. This is what our recommendation is, and I hope you stick with us.
What are you saying to schools that are not making any type of provisions available for home remote learning, where students have a special case of, say, an extremely vulnerable person at home? In the spring, you referred to that, and you said you'd like to see some provision, or maybe that you had expected to see some provision. Now that's happening, and there are some school districts not providing.
Anyway, I'm not looking for people to have excuses not to send their kids to school. I'm trying to do everything I can to do it safely. As you point out, Dan, maybe some have, pre-existing condition or reason they don't feel like they can get to school. That's why we've renewed contracts with a number of our remote learning partners to make sure there is an option on the table if that's the case. But I hope it's for a small minority of kids.
In the absence of some FDA ruling, is there some dead date or will this last for state employees on the vaccine?
I don't think so. It's not like school starts on August 28th. We've got a little more flexibility for state employees. And they can remote work. I mean, there's other alternatives.
Are you swayed by Governor Cuomo's move today, instituting a mandate?
Yeah, I follow that pretty carefully. I saw what LA did as well. I thought that was, thoughtful. And I also saw the state police said, forget it, I'm not going to enforce it in LA. So there's a balance you have to reach. Rules only work if people generally think you're going in the right direction, and 98% of them are self-enforced. I think we've done a pretty good job. I think the state of Connecticut has done a good job in that over the last year and a half. We didn't have to have the heavy hand of enforcement. People did the right thing because they knew it kept them safe. I think we're going to get to the same place over the next couple of weeks.
Do you think that message is clear enough? Do you think people are still looking for more specifics than are available, including us?
Specifics, what do you mean, Dan?
I have a sense that people, including us in the media, are looking for much more exact, precise, rigid, we're going to do this on such and such a date. When you see
I
throughout
see.
the 17 months to be talking about common sense approach, is there a clash between on one side, we're going to use a common sense approach, and the other, no, we need exact rules on dates and times and places?
I think I'm going to lean heavily on the common sense approach, do everything I can to convince people this is the right thing to do for yourself, for your kids, your school, and your community. Everybody says if it gets above 6.72%, then this rule versus that rule. There'll be guidelines, but not going to be rigid. Thanks, everybody. Welcome back, Dan. Where were you?
Colorado.
Ah.
Played in the Ultimate Frisbee National Championships.